Do you want to be as close to Yeshua as David was? Do you want to be as close to Yeshua as David was? Have you discovered how much of David's life he was spent fleeing for his life? As you take a look at David's life, from the text we studied with Saul to the text we're looking at now, have you discovered that in order to be close to Yeshua, he had to be fleeing for his life for much of his life? I sometimes think that's what it takes to be close to Yeshua. And I think that's what we should be praying for our leader, for our chosen leader in America.
Oh, yes.
Every day, we should pray two things. One, God, I want you to make his policies a success. Economically, technically, politically, God, I want you to give him success because he wants America to be great. The second thing you should pray for him, Lord, I ask that you make him lean on you.
Oh, yes.
I ask that he leans on you because that is essential if he's going to lead the country. And for us to be close to Yeshua, we have to be fleeing for our own life from the evil that would destroy us. Imagine, David, the great king, he spent most of his life fleeing from evil. David, the great psalmist, and he spent most of his life fleeing for his life. David, the great warrior, and he spent most of his life fleeing for his life. David, the patriarch of Yeshua, and he spent most of his life fleeing for his life. The model leader of Israel, and he spent most of his life fleeing for his life. The Bible says David was close to the heart of God. And I think part of the reason he was close to the heart of God is because of the fact he spent so much time fleeing for his life. He had nowhere to run but Yeshua. Nowhere to run but God. And as we look at this text, 3-4 times you'll see the words. I like it better in the King James Version. It says, and it came to pass. 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 Modern translations kind of lose it and say it was just the flow of life. It was not just the flow of life. It was God fulfilling his prophecy, God doing what he had said, God making the reality of what he had promised into the reality on earth, even the goods and the bads of David's life. And it came to pass. That the son of David, who was getting ready to attack David, Absalom, he had his chariots decorated with gold. He had his chariots decorated with banners. He had his chariots decorated with ribbons. He had his chariots decorated and painted in bright colors. He had his chariots in a very flashy style. He had his horses with all of their trappings of bright linen with bells. He had all of the trappings so that the horses and the chariots, he had all the trappings of 50 men who would follow him wherever he went, jogging along with him, protecting him. I want to tell you something. The man presented a parade wherever he went. Have you ever been over on Southern Boulevard and been caught in the parade when President Trump lands and has to come to Mar-a-Lago? Absalom tried to create that same kind of parade for himself. He tried to create that same kind of an impression that he was royalty, and wherever he went, there was a royal contingency moving with him, and all the military and all the political and all the power structure was going with him. He did everything that he could to give the impression that he was the leader, that he was a great man, that he was a powerful man. And then it says in verse 2 that he got up very early. He got up very early and he went to the city gate. He went to the way of the gate, because the city gate in any city back then was ultimately important, because the city gate is where everybody went to do business. Whether it was economic business, whether it was political business, whether it was something that you had a need or a want or a desire, the legal business was done at the city gate. The economic business was done at the city gate. The business was done at the second city gate. Everybody came there. They had the ultimate sunshine law. If you want to get something done, you did it there, because all the politicians were there. All the political leaders, all of the scribes and the Pharisees would operate there, and everybody saw what took place. So that's the place where Absalom got up, and he came and he was there. First thing in the morning, he would be at the gate and he would wait for people to come. This was the ultimate sunshine law. And as people came into the city, they had their business that they wanted done there. He would stop them, he would talk to them, and he would say, "From what city are you from? What is your tribe? What is your business? What is your need?" Oh, if I were the king, if I were the leader, I would make sure that your cause was put on the front of the list, because it's that important. And he worked with absolutely everybody to estrange them from the king. Have you noticed it's taken you 4 days to get through the line, to get to the king's business, and they haven't even led you to the palace where the king's going to make a judgment on? If it was up to me, I'd make sure that you got things done right now. He tried to appear more caring, more loving to all of the people. But when you really look at it, what it really tells is that he had nothing else to do with his time but stand around the city gate. He wasn't really doing any work. He wasn't really getting anything done. He was just standing around making himself important with all these people. And he was giving the impression that he could help them. And if somebody came to him and threw themselves at their feet to bow down in front of him, he'd reach down with both hands, grab them, and he would pull them and he would lift them up, and he'd give them that European full embrazo. You embrace them, kiss them on one cheek, kiss them on the other cheek. Everybody who came, he gave the full treatment, that they were ultimately important. At the same time, he appeared to be so humble. He was taking and trying to be one of the boys. He was trying to make all of them felt that he cared. He was trying to give the impression that he was much nearer, dearer, and closer to that king who was so far away in the palace. He tried to focus completely upon himself. And so here we are, verse 7. And it came to pass. It came to pass. I find it so hard to believe in my life that nothing is a mistake that God missed. Because the Bible says, and it came to pass. It came to pass after 40 years. He comes to David and he says, I vowed a vow when I was in Yeshua. And I vowed that vow to the Lord. And I said that I was going to worship the Lord. If I was ever allowed to come back to Jerusalem, if I was allowed to live here, I was going to fulfill that vow to the Lord, and I was going to go to Hebron, the traditional city where the original leadership of Israel was. I would go back to that traditional city. It was sort of like Barack Obama going to Springfield, Illinois, where Abraham Lincoln used to live, and saying, "This is where I will run for the state senate in Illinois." He kind of ran back to that. And he said, "I will do this." Have you ever noticed how whenever people want to deceive, whenever they want to put themselves forward, they'll put a religious ring to what they're doing? He drags God's name into it. He says, well, I want to go over there. And I want to go there in order that I can worship God, because I vowed a vow to God and I want to fulfill the vow that I made. Have you ever had that happen where somebody, have you ever had anybody look you in the eye and say, so help me God? I mean, by God, I want to tell you, they're always dragging God into a conversation where God doesn't belong because the truth isn't there to begin with, and they bring him in as a witness. Have you ever seen that? You ever seen that? Not with Christians. That's why Jesus says, why Yeshua says, let your yes be yes and no be no. Don't be saying by God, by God, by God. Leave him out of it. Let your word be honest, and people will know that you're not a liar. In the course of your life, they'll know that you're true. But he brings to David, and he says, I've got this vow that I have to vow. What's David supposed to say? No, you can't vow your vow. No, you can't go to God. David says, go to Hebron and go in peace. Shalom. Go in peace. And so he went there. But as he's going there, he's also sending out spies to all of Israel, to all the tribes, to all the towns, to all the locations. He's sending out spies to all these different locations in Israel. And as he sends out the spies, he says, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, you are to start shouting, Absalom reigns in Hebron. He's got men planted on January 6th. You know how many undercover agents there were for a bad FBI? 280. You know how many bad FBI guys there were in uniform? 240. They were all there. And they were leading the crowd. Same thing Absalom does. He sends out men and he says, when you hear the sound of the shofar, that means a herald is coming and he's speaking news. He's speaking something important. When you hear this, you will be a herald shouting that Absalom is now reigning in Hebron. Absalom is now reigning in Hebron. There's something interesting about the way he's doing this. How many of you have heard the name Orson Welles?
Yeah. 1984.
Orson Welles. I heard about Orson Welles way back in 1933. Because Orson Welles was an actor, but he was a producer and he was a director. And in 1933, on Halloween, he did something really interesting because he took an adaptation of H.G. Wells's book, War of the Worlds, where Mars actually attacks Earth. And he took and he put it on the radio, but radio was just starting to get started in 1933. People were just getting used to how the radio worked. People were just getting used to breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. They were just getting used to the radio programs being interrupted by news broadcasts, which suddenly broke things off. So he took and he adapted H.G. Wells's book as though it was breaking news in the middle of a concert series. He started off with a concert and then he had an interruption. Breaking news, light flashes on Mars and they are sending ships to the Earth. And he, instantly the ships went the thousands of miles, the millions of miles from there to here. And he actually convinced people that there was an invasion from Mars and people were leaving and fleeing from their house. They were getting in their cars and they were driving away and that they were trying to avoid battle scenes that didn't exist. That's the same thing Absalom did. He laid out that he was a royal king and that he was taking over for his father in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem. Now this is interesting. The King James Version says, and they knew not. They had no idea why they were there. Absalom invited them to a party, so they went to the party. They had absolutely no idea this was going on. They were just part of the long line in the parade that was going with him. And many of the people from the towns, as they passed through, saw this large group of prominent people moving with Absalom, and that's all they saw. 200 men from Jerusalem, powerful leaders of the city, going with him, and they had no idea we're there. I love the way the King James says, and they knew not anything, for they went on in simplicity. They went on in simplicity. They kept in the dark. They had no idea what has happened. You know, I heard of a politician who said being a politician is very much like growing mushrooms. Somebody asked, what do you mean being a politician is like growing mushrooms? He says, well, you take the people and you treat them like mushrooms. You keep them in the dark and you feed them manure. And the mushrooms grow in the dark.
Like truffles.
Like cattle, yes. And that's what he was doing to these people. He was keeping them in the dark and he was feeding them manure. That he was the king, that he was the leader. And you have this movement as he's going with all these people, these prominent people who don't even know why they're there. You suddenly have the entire population of these towns looking and saying, Absalom has taken over. Absalom is ruling. Absalom is reigning. And he went and sent for Amphiphophel. This was David's counselor. And Amphiphophel was actually sacrificing at the temple. He was kind of a seer. He was sacrificing, and Absalom called him. And he said, I want you to come and I want you to counsel me because you've been such a wise counselor. You've been such a great counselor. You made my father what he was. I want you to assist me. I want you to help me. And he actually took the leading counselor, and he had all the appearances of having power when he actually had no power.
Because he didn't have the Lord.
He didn't have the Lord. And he didn't have the legal power. It's interesting.
That's so evil. It's evil.
It's interesting because
he's going to bring this evil up against him.
Right, he's going to raise up evil.
Evil was what he meant.
He's going to raise up evil. It's interesting because there was a man, and you've all heard of Restoration Destination.
Yeah.
It's that group. We have 75 duplexes in Pahokee, and we have ex-sexual offenders from prison come and live there as a halfway station while they get back into the employment world, get back into the economic world, get back and get going. Well, we promoted somebody to the executive director of the camp, and it all went to his head. It just absolutely filled his head because some movie companies from Europe came and wanted to see what we were doing and how we were doing it. Now, they were not godly. They didn't want to talk to a bunch of pastors who were running the program. They wanted to talk to these ex-offenders who were running the program on the campus. And so what happened was he got it into his head that he could take over the program. And we said, you can't take over the program because we have the legal constitution, we have the legal documents from the state of Florida, we have the legal documents for all of this. And so we took him to court and we threw him out, and he walked out with absolutely nothing. Absalom had absolutely nothing, but he gave the impression that he had something.
He was a usurper.
He was a usurper. And the people, some of the people, thought that they were following him. And so he took and he went after them. And David suddenly hears that your son, Absalom, has taken over, and David realizes he better flee. He realizes he better get out of there. He realizes he better run. He says to the people in Jerusalem, let us flee from our home. Speed up, we must depart. We must get out of here. He's going to bring evil upon us. He will strike us with the sword. And David runs in a panic. See, the whole thing that Absalom did was to create a crisis, to create a panic. And then David, seeing the results of it, he has to run and he has to flee. And suddenly, you have a paring away as people wind up being forced to choose sides, which side they're on. And I think that's why God allows us to have such difficulties, so that it clearly must be chosen which side we are on, which side we are working for. Do you realize how easy it is to get sucked into the world? Do you realize how easy it is to get pulled into somebody who says they're good, says they're godly, says they're doing right things, but then you look at them and you realize that's not true at all? And so the servants of David said, Lord David, we are ready to do anything you want. We just want to follow the king. We want to go with you. And David the king fled. And I like this because David the king fled and he went up the Mount of Olives, weeping, crying, screaming. His garments torn like he was seeing a death. Dirt thrown on his head. Garment covering his head. Shoes off his feet. Weeping and screaming, and all the people with him following exactly the same way, walking up the Mount of Olives. How many of you have been to Israel? It's phenomenal because you've got the Mount of Olives over here. You've got the Kidron Valley right through here. Then you've got Jerusalem right up here. And you've got these two juxtapositioned opposite each other. And David is going up the Mount of Olives, literally crying, weeping, screaming, wailing. Who's going to come to the top of that mountain? His feet are going to land on the top of the Mount of Olives. He's going to walk down the hill, across the Kidron Valley. All the dead in the tombs are going to come bursting forth to life, and it's going to split, and he's going to walk right in through the eastern gate, and he's going to walk up the hill right there to the Temple Mountain. He's going to the temple, and he's claiming, this is now my house. And David's going one way, but Yeshua is going to come the other way. And as I saw David running, weeping, leaving, panicking, I think of Yeshua coming the other way. And so we take a look at David literally preparing for death, and he's weeping and wailing. It may be his own death that he's crying for, and we see it. And all of the people went with King David, and they passed over the Kidron, and they went up the hill. And David says to Zadok, because that's how bad this separation was. He says to Zadok, the priest, he says to Zadok, now, I want you to understand, David's got 50 years of understanding the infighting and political intrigue of being a king or being on the outs with a king. So he says to Zadok, I want you to take the ark that you have brought with you, and I want you to take it back and put it on Temple Mount. Take it back to the temple. Take the ark back and put it in the tabernacle there. And if it is God's will, I will come back. He will bring me back. I will be in charge, and I want that the temple, the ark and the sanctuary of the tabernacle are not destroyed. You go there and you keep worshiping. And then he says something interesting. He says, by the way, take your 2 sons with you. And if you hear anything interesting that might help me as I'm trying to fight Absalom, you send one of your sons to me and tell me what's going on there. In the army, that's called intelligence. In college, that's called intelligence. He has the intelligence to know to send them back to keep the temple because he trusts God and he knows that the temple, the worship, should remain in Jerusalem. He's not going to let that be taken out because of him. He sends Zadok back with his 2 sons and he says, but if you hear of any intelligence, send it to me and I will then know what I need to do.
Because the cloud didn't move.
Yeah. He knew where it should be.
That's right.
God was where God wanted it to be. See, and sometimes we just have to trust. I'm going to walk through a really deep, dark valley of the shadow of difficulty, but I'm going to trust God that if God wants me back, I'm coming back, and I'm going to win, and I want to make the provisions that I can come back and that people can see what I'm doing, that people can see where I'm at. So he and his son, Ahisamar, and Jonathan went back, and he set up an intelligence service to keep an eye on what was going on. And he went, and there's kind of a cute thing going on here too, that it's kind of nice if I can get the. There's an old man who had been a servant of him, had been a servant of his father. The name was Hushai. And Hushai, now, I'm 82. I think Hushai was 87. And Hushai comes with his robe on, and he comes to David, and he says, reporting for duty, sir. This 87-year-old guy, reporting for duty, sir. Ready to go. I want to go with you. And David, in a very diplomatic way, as only a king can be, he says, I want to tell you, Hushai, it's like this. He says, if you come with me, you're only going to be a burden to me. But if you will go back to the city, and if you will tell Absalom that you want to serve him like you served me, and if you will tell him you want to stay, he will be glad to have you back. And then you can listen to what's going on in the palace, in the temple, in the tabernacle, in the marketplace. You can listen and see what's going on. You then, if you find out anything that's important in the palace, send it to Zadok the priest, and he will get it to me. David, even as he's leaving, is setting up an intelligence service in Jerusalem so that he knows what the enemy's plans and moves are. And they move forward. And that's so ultimately important, because that's, and time and again it says, and it came to pass, and it came to pass, and it came to pass. Do you want to be as close to Yeshua as David was? Well, then it's really important that you understand that you're going to have difficulties, you're going to have problems, and you need to focus really clearly on Yeshua. You need to focus on what he's doing, and you need to set up with your friends what's going on, where it's going on. I think it was the movie The Godfather, where he said, you have to keep your friends close.
And your enemies closer.
And your enemies closer. And that's often the way we, as Yeshua's people, have to be in these last days. I know who my leader is. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. But I also want to know what in the hell is going on in the world around me, because I know that hell is desperately trying to take over this world. And we need to pray for our president, that even as they're trying to attack him, that he will make right choices with wise counselors, have good intelligence, and he won't be deluded by either their power or his own. It's all in the hands of God.
Amen.
Will you rise for the Aaronic benediction?